The antiseptic smell burned in Dr. Lena Corbett's nostrils as she snapped on latex gloves with practiced precision. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across exam room 3. Outside, the steady beep of monitors and hushed voices of the night shift staff created a familiar symphony of controlled chaos. Lena's shoulders ached from 12 hours on duty. Her reflection in the glass cabinet showed dark circles under green eyes that had seen too much. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and checked the chart again. Bethany Lancer, 28, female. 4th visit in 6 months. The same pattern. Different injuries. Lena's stomach tightened as she pushed open the door. The woman on the exam table flinched at the sound, a reflexive movement that spoke volumes. Bethany's blonde hair hung limply around a face mottled with bruises in various stages of healing. Purple-blue marks bloomed across her left cheekbone, while older yellow-green shadows lingered along her jawline. "Mrs. Lancer," Lena said softly, keeping her voice neutral despite the anger simmering beneath her professional veneer. "I'm Dr. Corbett. I'll be examining you tonight." Bethany's eyes, one partially swollen shut, darted to the door behind Lena. "My husband is just parking the car." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Lena moved closer, the paper beneath Bethany crinkling loudly in the silence. "We have some time before he joins us," Lena said, her pen poised over the chart. "Can you tell me what happened?" Bethany's fingers twisted the wedding ring on her left hand, platinum with diamonds that caught the harsh light. "I fell down the stairs at our lake house." The lie hung between them like a physical presence. Lena noted the defensive posture, the way Bethany's shoulders curved inward, how her gaze never lifted above Lena's chin. "These bruises on your neck," Lena said, gesturing but not touching. "They don't match a fall." The finger-shaped marks were unmistakable. 4 distinct pressure points on one side, a thumb imprint on the other. Bethany's pulse visibly fluttered at her throat. "I must have hit the banister on the way down." Lena's pen scratched against the paper as she documented the injuries, each mark a silent accusation. The metallic taste of futility coated her tongue. She'd been here before with Bethany and too many others. The evidence collected, the reports filed, the authorities notified. And nothing ever changed. The examination continued in tense silence. Lena photographed the injuries with the hospital's documentation camera, each click echoing in the small room. Bethany winced as Lena's gentle fingers probed her ribs. 2 fractured ribs on the left side, Lena noted. "I'll order x-rays to confirm." The door swung open. Kevin Lancer filled the frame, his tailored suit and carefully styled hair a stark contrast to his wife's disheveled appearance. The scent of expensive cologne cut through the antiseptic, claiming the space as his territory. "There you are, sweetheart," he said. His voice honey-smooth. His eyes, cold as river stones, assessed Lena. "Doctor, how is my clumsy wife?" Lena felt her jaw tighten. "Mr. Lancer, I was just explaining to your wife that she has 2 fractured ribs and multiple contusions." "The stairs at our lake house are treacherous," Kevin said, moving to stand beside Bethany. His hand settled on her shoulder, fingers pressing just slightly too hard. Bethany's eyes dropped to her lap. "I've been telling her to be more careful." The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting momentary shadows across Kevin's face that seemed to reveal something monstrous beneath the polished exterior. Lena forced herself to maintain eye contact. "Mrs. Lancer needs rest and careful monitoring," she said, addressing Bethany directly. "I'd like to keep her overnight for observation." Kevin's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That won't be necessary. I can monitor her at home." "I really think, we appreciate your concern, Doctor, but I'll take care of my wife." His tone left no room for argument. Now, if you'll prepare the discharge papers. Lena felt heat rise in her chest, her pulse thrumming in her ears. She wanted to object, to insist, to call security. But experience had taught her the limits of her authority. Kevin Lancer was a major hospital donor. His family name adorned the new pediatric wing. She'd tried reporting him before. The police had interviewed him at his office, surrounded by photographs of Kevin shaking hands with the mayor, the police commissioner, the district attorney. The case had disappeared like morning mist. "I'll prepare your discharge instructions," Lena said, each word tasting like defeat. As she turned to leave, Bethany's eyes met hers, a fleeting connection filled with desperation and resignation. In that moment, something inside Lena hardened into resolve. The system had failed Bethany Lancer. Again, but perhaps there was another way. The records room hummed with the software of computers. Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she inserted her ID card into the workstation. The screen bathed her face in blue light, highlighting the determined set of her jaw. What she was about to do could cost her license, her career, everything she'd worked for. She glanced at the door, ensuring it was locked, then navigated to Bethany's file. The official photos would be uploaded to the secure server, accessible only to authorized personnel and law enforcement, who would do nothing. Lena reached into her pocket and withdrew her personal phone. Against every protocol, every ethical guideline, she connected it to the computer and began downloading copies of Bethany's injury documentation. Each image that transferred felt like a weight on her conscience, but the memory of Bethany's eyes, of all the women's eyes over the years, was heavier still. The computer chimed softly as the transfer completed. Lena quickly disconnected her phone, erased the digital footprints of her actions, and logged out of the system. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she slipped out of the records room, the stolen evidence burning in her pocket like contraband. In the empty corridor, the night shift lighting cast long shadows that seemed to follow her. The squeak of her shoes on the polished floor sounded unnaturally loud. She passed the security guard's station with a casual nod, fighting to keep her expression neutral despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Once inside the staff locker room, Lena leaned against the cold metal and exhaled shakily. There was no turning back now. Lena's apartment was bathed in the grey light of early morning. She hadn't slept. Her eyes burned as she stared at the address scrawled on a piece of paper in her trembling hand. The Obsidian Tower. Penthouse. An urban legend among hospital staff. When cases like Bethany's came in, when justice seemed impossible, whispers circulated about a man who could make problems disappear. A shadow ruler of the city who operated outside the constraints of law. Most dismissed it as fantasy. A coping mechanism for healthcare workers confronted daily with the failures of the system. But Lena had noticed patterns over the years. Abusers who suddenly left town, disappeared, or occasionally turned up in the ER themselves, broken and unable or unwilling to explain their injuries. She'd never sought him out before, had never crossed that line. Until now. The photos of Bethany's injuries were spread across her kitchen table, clinical and damning. 4 visits, escalating violence. A woman who would eventually return as a corpse if nothing changed. Lena gathered the photos with shaking hands and slipped them into a manila envelope. The weight of her decision pressed down on her shoulders as she changed out of her scrubs into jeans and a sweater. In the bathroom mirror she barely recognized herself, the determined set of her mouth, the dangerous glint in her eyes. She was no longer just Dr. Corbett, bound by oaths and protocols. She was becoming something else. Someone willing to step into shadows. The Obsidian Tower lived up to its name, a sleek monolith of black glass that reflected the cloudy sky like a dark mirror. It stood apart from the city's other skyscrapers, both physically and in its aura of untouchable elegance. Lena stood on the sidewalk opposite, the manila envelope clutched to her chest like a shield. Pedestrians flowed around her, the morning rush oblivious to her internal struggle. Was she really going to do this? Seek out a man who might not even exist? A criminal, if the rumors were true? The alternative, doing nothing, flashed through her mind. Bethany's face, progressively more damaged with each hospital visit. The inevitable conclusion. Lena squared her shoulders and crossed the street. The lobby of the Obsidian Tower was a study in minimalist luxury. Black marble floors reflected the crystal chandelier overhead. The air smelled of leather and something else, something older and richer that Lena couldn't identify. A security guard watched her approach from behind a desk of polished obsidian. His posture was too perfect, his attention too focused to be typical building security. "I'm here to see Mr. Thorne," Lena said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. The guard's expression didn't change. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have something he'll want to see." She tightened her grip on the envelope. The guard studied her for a long moment, his gaze unsettlingly perceptive. Then he lifted a phone and spoke softly into it. "Your name?" he asked, after replacing the receiver. "Dr. Lena Corbett." He nodded toward the private elevator at the far end of the lobby. "Mr. Thorne will see you." Lena's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked across the vast lobby. Each click of her boots on marble echoed like a countdown. The elevator doors slid open silently at her approach, revealing an interior lined with dark wood and brass fixtures. No buttons. Only a scanner that glowed red, then green as she stepped inside. The doors closed, sealing her in. The elevator ascended swiftly, her stomach dropping with the sudden motion. Lena closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath that smelled of sandalwood and citrus, an air freshener that couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of wealth and power. When the doors opened again, she stepped into another world. The penthouse foyer opened into a vast space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Antique furniture, pieces that belonged in museums, arranged with modern art. Books lined the walls, their leather bindings suggesting centuries rather than decades. And at the center of it all stood a man, Marius Thorne. He was tall, with broad shoulders, accentuated by an impeccably tailored black suit. His face was all angles and planes, timeless in a way Lena couldn't define. Dark hair swept back from a high forehead. But it was his eyes that held her, ancient eyes, impossibly dark, watching her with the patient interest of a predator. "Dr. Corbett," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in her chest. "What brings a healer to my door?" Lena swallowed, suddenly aware of how out of place she was in her simple clothes, with her exhausted face and desperate mission. But she had come too far to retreat. "Justice," she said, stepping forward and extending the envelope. "For someone the system won't protect." Something flickered in those dark eyes, interest perhaps, or hunger. Marius took the envelope, his fingers brushing hers. His touch was cool, and sent an electric current up her arm. He didn't open it immediately, studying her face instead. "And what price are you willing to pay for this justice?" he asked softly. The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications Lena could feel but not fully comprehend. She stood at a threshold, not just of this penthouse, but of a world hidden beneath the surface of the one she knew. "Whatever it takes," she answered, the words falling from her lips before she could reconsider. A smile curved Marius's mouth, revealing teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp in the morning light. "Then let us discuss terms," he said, gesturing toward the interior of the penthouse. "Welcome to my home, Dr. Corbett." Lena stepped forward, crossing an invisible line. Behind her, the elevator doors closed with a soft final click. The interior of Marius Thorne's penthouse unfolded before Lena like a revelation, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital corridors she'd left behind. Dark hardwood floors gleamed beneath her feet, absorbing the click of her sensible shoes as she followed him deeper into his domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city sprawled below them, bathed in the pale morning light that seemed unable to fully penetrate the space. Marius moved with liquid grace, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the minimalist furniture. Everything here spoke of restrained wealth, not the gaudy displays of the nouveau riche, but the quiet confidence of old money. Very old money. "Please," he said, gesturing toward a black leather sofa positioned near a fireplace, where blue flames danced over crystalline stones. Lena perched on the edge of the sofa, her body tense as a coiled spring. The envelope rested in Marius's hands, still unopened. He stood before her, studying her with those fathomless eyes. "Before we proceed," he said, "I should warn you that once opened, this path cannot be abandoned. Are you certain this is what you want?" The question hung between them, weighted with significance beyond its simple words. Lena thought of Bethany Lance's bruised face, of the X-rays showing healed fractures that told a story of systematic abuse spanning years. "I'm certain," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Marius nodded once, then slid a manicured fingernail beneath the envelope's seal. The paper parted with a whisper. He extracted the contents, photographs, medical reports, police statements that had led nowhere. His expression remained impassive as he examined each document with methodical precision. Then he reached the photographs. Something shifted in his demeanor, subtle but profound. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. His fingers tightened on the glossy paper, and Lena heard the faintest crackle as the edge began to bend under his grip. "Kevin Lancer," he said, the name emerging as a low growl. "Tell me about him." Lena swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Hedge fund manager, connected to half the police department through his charitable foundation. His wife Bethany came into my ER last night with 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and bruising consistent with attempted strangulation." "And the authorities?" Marius asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Took her statement, called it a domestic dispute, released him 3 hours later." Lena's hands clenched in her lap. "It's the 4th time she's been admitted this year. Each time the charges disappear." Marius set the documents on a glass table with deliberate care. When he looked up, his eyes had changed. A subtle shift in color, a darkness that seemed to pulse with something ancient and hungry. "And what justice do you seek, Dr. Corbett?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "I want him stopped," she said. "Permanently." "Permanently," he echoed, the word taking on new dimensions in his mouth. "Do you mean death, doctor?" The question struck her like a physical blow. In the sterile confines of the hospital, with its oaths and ethics, she had never allowed herself to articulate what she truly wanted. But here, in this twilight space, the truth emerged. "I want him to never hurt another woman again," she said carefully, "by whatever means necessary." A smile curved Marius's lips. "Not warm, but appreciative. Diplomatic," he murmured. "But honest enough." He moved to a cabinet of dark wood and extracted 2 crystal glasses. "Drink, it's 8 in the morning," Lena pointed out. "Time is relative," he replied, pouring amber liquid into one glass. "Especially when discussing matters of life and death." He returned to sit opposite her, the glass cradled in his long fingers. He didn't offer her one after all, she noticed. "Your reputation precedes you, Doctor. Corbett, he said. Brilliant trauma surgeon. Advocate for the vulnerable. Thorn in the side of hospital administration. His lips quirked. We have that in common, perhaps. An appreciation for thorns. How do you know about me? She asked, unease crawling up her spine. I make it my business to know about everyone who enters my territory, he said simply. Especially those with unusual requests. Has someone approached you about this before? Not about Kevin Lancer specifically. Marius took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers, but about justice beyond the reach of conventional law. Yes, many times. Lena shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. What happens now? Now, Marius said, setting down his glass. We discuss terms. You've asked for my intervention. I'm inclined to grant it. But nothing in this world is free, Dr. Corbett. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What's your price? He leaned forward, and the air between them seemed to compress. A favor. To be determined at a time of my choosing. That's rather open-ended, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Indeed. His smile was predatory, but I assure you, it will be commensurate with the service rendered. And if I refuse, then you leave with your envelope. And Mr. Lancer continues his activities. Lena thought of Bethany's eyes, vacant with terror and resignation, of the wedding ring embedded in swollen flesh because she'd refused to remove it despite everything, of the whispered confession. Next time, he'll kill me. All right, she said. A favor. Marius extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. His skin was cool against hers, his grip firm but not crushing. Yet, as their palms met, Lena felt something pass between them, a current of energy that raced up her arm and spread throughout her body. For an instant, she glimpsed something beneath his carefully composed exterior, vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman. She pulled her hand away, heart racing. What are you? His expression revealed nothing. Someone who can deliver what you've asked for. A phone chimed, hers. Lena fumbled in her pocket, grateful for the interruption. A text from the hospital. Asterisk Bethany Lancer checked out AMA. Husband picked her up 20 minutes ago. Damn it, she hissed, showing Marius the screen. He's got her. Something dangerous flickered across his features. He stood in one fluid motion. Then we must act quickly. He pressed a button on a sleek panel on the wall. Gideon, the Lancer residence now. A voice responded immediately. Yes, sir. Marius turned back to her. Come, we have work to do. We? Lena asked, rising to her feet. I thought you'd handle this, whatever this is. You brought this to my attention, he said, retrieving a black coat from a closet. I have a shift in 4 hours, she protested weakly. His dark eyes pinned her. Call in sick. Before she could argue further, the elevator doors slid open, revealing a tall man with close-cropped silver hair and the bearing of a soldier. His eyes, a strange amber color, swept over Lena with clinical assessment before returning to Marius. The car is ready, he said. Thank you, Gideon. Marius gestured for Lena to precede him into the elevator. Dr. Corbett will be accompanying us. Gideon's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested surprise or disapproval. Nevertheless, he stepped aside to let them enter. As the doors closed, sealing the three of them in the confined space, Lena felt a wave of vertigo. What had she done? Who were these people? The man beside her radiated a quiet menace that should have sent her running. Instead, she found herself drawn to him, fascinated by the power that hummed beneath his controlled exterior. The elevator descended swiftly, the floors ticking away on the digital display. No one spoke. The silence pressed against Lena's ears, broken only by the soft sound of her breathing, which seemed unnaturally loud compared to her companions. When the doors opened again, they revealed an underground garage of polished concrete. A sleek black car waited, its engine already purring. "After you," Marius said, his hand at the small of her back, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his palm. The interior of the car was luxurious, black leather seats, privacy glass, the faint scent of something that reminded Lena of cedar and night air. Gideon took the wheel, while Marius sat beside her in the back, his long legs stretched out, his presence filling the space. As they pulled out into the morning traffic, Lena's phone chimed again. Another text, this time from an unknown number, asterisk, "Help me, he knows." Her breath caught. "It's from Bethany." "How did she get my number?" Marius glanced at the screen. "Your hospital badge. It would have your name." In desperation, people become resourceful. "We need to hurry," Lena said, her professional calm giving way to urgency. "Gideon," Marius said simply. The car accelerated, weaving through traffic with impossible precision. Lena gripped the door handle, watching the city blur past. "Tell me about Kevin Lancer," Marius said, his voice conversational despite the tension thrumming through the car. Lena forced herself to focus. 48, self-made millionaire, philanthropist on paper, controls his wife's every move, has a temper that's gotten worse over the years. Vices, alcohol, gambling, women, according to Bethany. Marius nodded, as if confirming something. "And where do they live?" "Westlake Heights. One of those gated mansions with private security." A small smile touched his lips. "Gates and guards are no obstacle." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down Lena's spine. "What exactly are you planning to do?" Marius turned those fathomless eyes on her. "First, we ensure Bethany's safety. Then Mr. Lancer and I will have a conversation. And then he will never harm another woman again." The simple statement carried the weight of absolute truth. Lena wanted to press further, but something in his expression warned against it. Instead she asked, "How will we get past security?" "Leave that to me," he said. The car turned onto the winding road that led up to Westlake Heights, an exclusive enclave perched above the city. Houses here were hidden behind high walls and lush landscaping, the residents protected by both wealth and distance from the realities of ordinary life. As they approached the guarded gate, Lena's anxiety spiked. "They'll never let us in without." "Watch," Marius said softly. Gideon slowed the car as they reached the checkpoint. A uniformed guard stepped out of the booth, approaching with the practiced caution of private security. He bent to peer through the driver's window. "Good morning," Gideon said pleasantly. "We're here to see Kevin Lancer." The guard frowned. "I don't have you on the visitor list." "Look again," Marius said from the back seat, his voice taking on a strange resonant quality that seemed to vibrate in Lena's bones. The guard's expression went blank for a moment, his eyes unfocusing. Then he straightened, nodding. "Of course, sir. My apologies. Go right ahead." He returned to the booth, and the gate swung open. Lena stared at Marius, her medical mind racing through possibilities. Hypnosis. Some form of suggestion? "How did you—" "We all have our talents, Dr. Corbett," he said, his eyes glittering with something ancient and inhuman, some more unusual than others. The car wound through the manicured streets until it reached a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion set back from the road. A fountain played in the circular driveway, the water catching the morning light. "Wait here," Marius instructed, as Gideon parked a discreet distance from the house. "No," Lena said firmly. "I'm coming with you. Bethany knows me. She'll trust me. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Then he inclined his head. Very well, but stay close, and do exactly as I say. They approached the front door together, Gideon following a few paces behind. Before they could ring the bell, Marius paused, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to something beyond human hearing. There's been violence here, he said, his voice hardening. Recently, Lena felt her stomach clench. How do you know? Instead of answering, he reached for the ornate door handle. It turned easily in his grip, though Lena was certain it should have been locked. The foyer beyond was a study in opulence, marble floors, crystal chandelier, a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. But the perfection was marred by a toppled vase, water and flowers spreading across the polished stone. Bethany, Lena called, her doctor's instincts taking over. It's Dr. Corbett from the hospital. A crash from upstairs, a man's voice raised in anger. Marius moved with startling speed, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Lena followed, her heart pounding. Gideon remained at the foot of the stairs, his posture alert, watching the entrance. They found them in the master bedroom, a cavernous space dominated by a king-sized bed. Kevin Lancer stood with his back to the door, a tumbler of amber liquid in one hand. Before him, Bethany cowered against the wall, a fresh bruise blooming on her cheekbone, blood trickling from her split lip. "Who the hell are you?" Kevin demanded, spinning to face them. He was a handsome man in an aggressive way, expensive haircut, tailored clothes, the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. "How did you get in here?" Marius stepped forward, placing himself between Kevin and the women. "Mr. Lancer," he said, his voice deceptively mild, "I believe it's time we discussed your treatment of your wife." Kevin's face flushed with anger. "This is my house. Get out before I call security." "By all means," Marius gestured to the phone on the nightstand. "Call them." While the men faced off, Lena hurried to Bethany's side. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, automatically checking the woman's pupils, pulse, the pattern of bruising. "He knows I talked to you," Bethany whispered, her voice trembling. "He said he'd kill me this time." "That won't happen," Lena promised, helping her to sit on the edge of the bed. Kevin took a threatening step toward Marius. "I don't know who you think you are, but you've made a serious mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? Who my friends are?" "I know exactly who you are," Marius said, his voice dropping to a register that raised the hair on Lena's arms. "A predator who believes himself beyond consequence." Something in his tone made Kevin falter. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He glanced toward the door, perhaps calculating his chances of escape. "Bethany, get your things," Lena urged quietly. "You're not staying here." "She's not going anywhere," Kevin snarled, his attention snapping back to his wife. "Bethany, tell these people to leave. Now." Bethany flinched at his command, but didn't move to obey. Instead, she pressed closer to Lena, her entire body trembling. Kevin's face contorted with rage. He lunged forward, glass tumbler raised like a weapon. "You ungrateful bitch." What happened next occurred so quickly that Lena's brain struggled to process it. One moment, Kevin was charging toward them. The next he was pinned against the wall, Marius's hand around his throat, feet dangling inches above the floor. "That," Marius said softly, "was unwise." Kevin's eyes bulged, his face reddening as he clawed ineffectually at the hand restraining him. Marius held him with apparent effortlessness, like a child holding a doll. "Dr. Corbett," Marius said without turning, "please take Mrs. Lancer downstairs. Gideon will assist you in gathering what she needs." Lena hesitated, medical ethics warring with the visceral satisfaction of seeing Kevin restrained. What are you going to do? Now Marius did turn, and what Lena saw in his face made her blood freeze. His eyes had changed completely, the irises now a deep crimson that seemed to glow from within. When he spoke, she glimpsed teeth that had elongated into delicate but unmistakable fangs. I'm going to ensure he understands the consequences of his actions, Marius said, his voice inhuman now, a resonant growl that seemed to emanate from somewhere deeper than his chest. Go now. Understanding crashed over Lena like a wave of ice water, the unnatural stillness, the predatory grace, the eyes that had seen centuries pass, the influence over the guard. Vampire. The word rose unbidden in her mind, archaic and absurd, yet undeniable in the face of the evidence before her. She should have been terrified, should have run. Instead, she found herself nodding, guiding the shell-shocked Bethany toward the door. Wait, Bethany said suddenly, pulling away from Lena's supporting arm. She approached Marius and the struggling Kevin, her steps unsteady but determined. Bethany, Lena warned, we should go. But Bethany stood before her husband, meeting his bulging eyes. 8 years, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. 8 years of hell. No more. She turned to Marius, something like recognition in her gaze. Make him suffer. Then she allowed Lena to lead her from the room, closing the door on Kevin's strangled pleas. Gideon waited at the foot of the stairs, his posture relaxed but alert. His amber eyes took in Bethany's injuries with a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. This way, Mrs. Lancer, he said, gesturing toward what appeared to be a guest bedroom. You'll want to pack essentials only. As Bethany moved to collect her belongings, Lena turned to Gideon, her voice low and urgent. What is he? Gideon's expression remained impassive. I believe you already know the answer to that, Doctor. That's impossible, she hissed. Medically, scientifically impossible. A thin smile crossed Gideon's face. And yet you saw with your own eyes. Before she could respond, a muffled scream echoed from upstairs, cut off abruptly. Bethany paused in her packing, her face pale but resolute. He won't kill him, Gideon said, though whether he was reassuring Lena or Bethany wasn't clear. That would be inefficient. Lena wanted to demand explanations, to make sense of what she'd witnessed, but Bethany's immediate needs took precedence. She helped the woman gather medications, clothes, important documents, the essentials for starting over. 20 minutes later, they were loading the last bag into the car when Marius emerged from the house. He had restored his human appearance, eyes dark once more, teeth normal, his composure perfect, except for a slight flush to his normally pale skin. It's done, he said simply, joining them at the car. Is he? Lena couldn't finish the question. Alive, Marius confirmed. And he will remain so, provided he adheres to certain restrictions. What kind of restrictions? Bethany asked, her voice small but steady. Marius regarded her with something like respect. He will never approach you again, never contact you, never harm another woman. A cold smile touched his lips. He has given his word and his blood on this matter. Bethany nodded slowly, as if processing this information. Then, to Lena's surprise, she extended her hand to Marius. Thank you, she said simply. He took her hand briefly, inclining his head. Live well, Mrs. Lancer. That will be thanks enough. They drove in silence back to the city, the morning sun now high overhead. Bethany stared out the window, occasionally touching her bruised face, but seeming more present with each passing mile. Where should we take you? Lena asked eventually. Do you have family? Friends? My sister in Portland, Bethany said after a moment's consideration. Kevin never let me see her, but she'd help me. Then Portland it is, Marius said. Gideon will arrange transportation. I can't just leave, Bethany protested weakly. My things, my life. Your life is what matters, Lena said firmly. Everything else can be replaced. Bethany fell silent again, nodding slowly. They stopped at a discreet hotel downtown. Gideon disappeared inside, returning minutes later with a key card. Room 512, he said, handing it to Bethany. It's reserved for a week under the name Elizabeth Bennet. There are clothes in your size in the closet and a credit card in the desk drawer. A car will come for you tomorrow morning to take you to the airport. Bethany stared at him in disbelief. How did you... We have resources, Marius said simply, and experience in these matters. Lena accompanied Bethany to her room, checking her injuries one final time and writing down her personal number. Call me any time, she insisted. Day or night. Bethany hugged her suddenly, fiercely. Thank you, she whispered. For believing me, for helping me. Be safe, Lena said, returning the embrace. Be free. When she returned to the car, Marius was waiting alone, Gideon having disappeared on some unspecified errand. What now? She asked, sliding into the seat beside him. Now, he said, we talk. The car pulled away from the hotel, merging into the midday traffic. Lena felt exhaustion crashing over her, the adrenaline of the morning giving way to bone-deep fatigue. What you saw today, Marius began, his eyes fixed on the city beyond the window, raises questions. You're a vampire, she said bluntly, too tired for circumlocution. He turned to her, one eyebrow raised in apparent amusement. Direct. I appreciate that. Am I wrong? The term is simplistic, but not inaccurate. Lena ran a hand through her hair, trying to reconcile medical science with what she'd witnessed. That's not possible. And yet, here we are. His voice held centuries of patience. The world is larger and stranger than your textbooks suggest, Dr. Corbett. So what happens now? She asked, echoing her earlier question. You drink my blood as payment. Turn me into whatever you are. A genuine laugh escaped him. A surprisingly warm sound. Nothing so dramatic. Our agreement stands a favor to be determined later. And Kevin Lancer, Marius's expression hardened, he will never harm another woman. I've ensured it. How? I've bound him with his own blood, he said, as if this explained everything. He is marked. Should he attempt to harm a woman again, the consequences will be immediate and severe. That's not possible, Lena repeated, though with less conviction. You keep saying that, Marius observed. Yet you sought me out precisely because you believed I could do what conventional means could not. He had her there. Lena fell silent, watching the familiar streets of her city pass by, everything looking strangely different in the aftermath of the morning's revelations. I should be terrified of you, she said finally. Yes, he agreed. You should be. But I'm not. The realization surprised her even as she voiced it. I should be running as far and as fast as I can, but instead, she met his gaze directly. Instead, I want to know more. Something kindled in his dark eyes. Interest, perhaps, or hunger of a different kind. Careful, Dr. Corbett, he said softly. Curiosity about my kind can be dangerous. I've spent my career walking into danger to help others, she replied. This doesn't feel so different. The car slowed, pulling up in front of her apartment building. Lena hadn't given the driver her address. She realized with a jolt. You know where I live, she said, not entirely surprised. I know many things about you, Lena, Marius replied, using her first name for the first time. The sound of it in his voice sent a shiver down her spine that wasn't entirely fear. "Will I see you again?" she asked, her hand on the door handle. "That depends," he said, those ancient eyes studying her face. "Do you wish to?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities both terrifying and exhilarating. Lena thought of the hospital waiting for her, of her ordered, logical world of medicine and science. Then she thought of Marius's hand around Kevin's throat, of the justice he'd delivered when the system had failed. "Yes," she said simply. He nodded once, as if her answer confirmed something he'd already known. "Then you will." She stepped out of the car, the midday sun warm on her face after the cool interior. Before she closed the door, Marius spoke again. "One more thing, Doctor. Our business today, what I am, must remain between us." It wasn't a request. The warning in his voice was clear. "I understand," she said. His expression softened fractionally. "Rest. You've had a trying morning." The car pulled away, leaving Lena standing on the sidewalk watching until it disappeared around a corner. She should have been exhausted, traumatized, questioning her sanity. Instead, she felt strangely energized, as if she'd glimpsed a hidden layer of reality that had always existed beneath the surface of her world. She turned toward her building, fumbling for her keys. A shadow fell across her path. "Dr. Corbett." The voice was male, unfamiliar. Lena looked up to find a man blocking her way, expensive suit, cold eyes, the bearing of someone accustomed to intimidation. "Can I help you?" she asked, instinctively taking a step back. "Kevin Lancer sends his regards," the man said, his hand moving inside his jacket. Fear crystallized in her chest. She backed away further, glancing around for help, for escape. "Your vampire friend," the man continued, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper, "isn't the only one with connections in this city." From the shadows of the building's entrance, a familiar voice spoke, cold, deadly, and unmistakable. "I believe," Marius said, stepping into the light. "You were about to deliver a message." The man's hand froze halfway inside his jacket. His eyes widened, pupils dilating with sudden fear. The confidence that had radiated from him moments before evaporated, like morning dew under a merciless sun. Marius moved with liquid grace, closing the distance between them in what seemed like a single heartbeat. He wore the same immaculate suit from earlier, but now he looked different to Lena, predatory, ancient, a force of nature, barely contained in human form. "I don't believe we've been introduced," Marius said, his voice deceptively soft. "You work for Kevin Lancer." The man's throat worked as he swallowed. "This doesn't concern you. Anything concerning Dr. Corbett concerns me." Marius tilted his head slightly. "Your name?" "James Harrow." The man answered automatically, then blinked as if surprised by his own compliance. Marius smiled, showing no teeth. "I'd like you to deliver a message to your employer instead." Lena watched, transfixed, as Marius leaned closer to Harrow, whispering something she couldn't hear. The color drained from Harrow's face. His hand, now visible and empty, trembled at his side. "Do we understand each other?" Marius asked, straightening. Harrow nodded jerkily. "Perfectly." "Excellent." Marius stepped aside. "You may go." The man backed away, stumbling slightly, before turning and hurrying down the street. He didn't look back. "What did you say to him?" Lena asked when Harrow had disappeared from view. Marius turned to her, his expression softening. "I merely clarified the consequences should any harm come to you. You knew he'd be here." "It wasn't a question. I suspected Lancer might retaliate. I didn't go far." He gestured toward her building. "Shall we? You're not safe on the street." Lena hesitated, keys clutched in her hand. The events of the morning, Bethany's injuries, the revelation of Marius's true nature, and now this confrontation, swirled in her mind like leaves caught in a whirlwind. "Why are you protecting me?" she asked. Something flickered in Marius's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she would question him now. "Because you showed courage where others would have shown fear. Because you kept your word." He paused. "Because I find myself drawn to you, Dr. Corbett." The admission hung between them, honest and unexpected. Lena felt her pulse quicken. "Come inside," she said finally, turning toward her building. "I think we have more to discuss." Her apartment felt smaller with Marius in it. He moved through her space with careful respect, examining her bookshelves, the framed medical degree on the wall, the scattered evidence of her life. Lena watched him from the kitchen as she made coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "You have questions," he said, accepting the mug she offered. "1,000 of them." She sat across from him, cradling her own coffee. "Let's start with Kevin Lancer. What happens now?" "That depends on him." Marius set his untouched coffee on the side table. "If he's wise, he'll leave the city. If not," he shrugged elegantly, "there are other ways to ensure he's no longer a threat." "You would kill him?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "I prefer not to." His gaze was steady. "It draws unnecessary attention, but I will not allow him to harm you or anyone else under my protection." "Like Bethany?" "Yes." He leaned forward slightly. "You understand that she came to us, to my people, for sanctuary?" Lena nodded slowly. "She said something about a shelter. I didn't realize. We maintain several safe houses for those in need. Humans who require discretion." His lips curved in a faint smile. "We were once human ourselves, Dr. Corbett. Some of us remember what it means to be vulnerable." The casual confirmation of his inhuman nature sent a shiver through her. "How old are you, really?" "Old enough to have seen empires rise and fall." He glanced around her apartment. "Old enough to appreciate the comforts of modern civilization." Before she could ask another question, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. "The hospital." With a murmured apology, she answered, "Dr. Corbett." It was Nurse Chen, her voice tight with urgency. "Kevin Lancer is here. He's demanding to see his wife." Lena's blood turned to ice. "Is security with her?" "Yes, but he's making a scene, threatening legal action, saying we've kidnapped her." Chen lowered her voice. "Dr. Corbett, he has men with him. They don't look like lawyers." Marius was watching her, his expression alert. He could hear both sides of the conversation, she realized. "I'm coming in," Lena said, already standing. "Don't let anyone near Bethany's room." "No one." She ended the call, meeting Marius's gaze. "Lancer's at the hospital." "So I heard." He rose in one fluid motion. "My car is waiting downstairs. This is my patient, my responsibility," she said firmly. "And Lancer is my problem." His tone brooked no argument. "We'll go together." The sleek black car slid through traffic with preternatural speed, Marius making a brief call as they traveled. By the time they reached the hospital, Lena's fear had crystallized into determination. She strode through the emergency entrance with Marius at her side, aware of the stares they attracted. She in her rumpled clothes from the morning shift, he in his impeccable suit, both moving with singular purpose. They found Kevin Lancer in the main lobby, surrounded by 3 men in dark suits. He was red-faced, jabbing his finger at the hospital administrator, a petite woman who stood her ground despite the intimidation. "Don't care about your policies. That's my wife, and I demand to see her now." "Mr. Lancer," the administrator replied calmly, "as I've explained, your wife has requested no visitors." She's not in her right mind. She needs... Lancer broke off, his gaze landing on Lena. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by ugly rage. You're the one who turned her against me. Lena felt Marius tense beside her, but she stepped forward. Lancer, your wife has multiple injuries consistent with physical assault. She's exercising her legal right to refuse visitors. Injuries she got from falling down the stairs, he snarled. She's clumsy. Always has been. The pattern of bruising suggests otherwise, as does the fact that this is her third emergency room visit this year. Lancer's face darkened further. You self-righteous bitch. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I believe that's my line, Marius said, his voice carrying through the lobby like the toll of a bell. Lancer's attention shifted, his expression changing as he registered Marius's presence. Something like uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Thorn. He straightened, trying to regain his composure. This is a private matter. Not anymore. Marius moved to stand beside Lena. Corbett is under my protection, as is your wife. A muscle twitched in Lancer's jaw. You're overstepping, Thorn. My business dealings with your organization don't give you the right to interfere in my personal life. Your personal life became my concern when you put your hands on a woman seeking sanctuary. Marius's voice remained conversational, but Lena felt the temperature in the room seemed to drop. And when you sent a man to threaten Dr. Corbett, Lancer's gaze darted to his companions, who had subtly shifted their positions, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. The hospital security guards looked nervous, clearly outmatched. Let's discuss this privately, Lancer suggested, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. No need to make a scene. There's nothing to discuss. Marius took a step forward. You will leave this hospital. You will sign divorce papers giving your wife everything she asks for, and you will never contact her again. Lancer laughed, the sound brittle with disbelief. Or what? You'll kill me? In front of witnesses? Death, Marius said softly, would be a mercy I'm not inclined to grant you. Something in his tone made Lancer's smile falter. One of his men moved forward, hand inside his jacket. What happened next occurred so quickly that later, Lena would struggle to piece it together. Marius moved, a blur rather than a man, and suddenly the armed guard was on his knees, his weapon skittering across the floor. The other two men found themselves similarly disarmed and restrained, though Marius appeared not to have touched them. Lancer stood alone now, his face ashen. Marius approached him with unhurried steps. Kevin Lancer, he said, his voice pitched for Lancer's ears alone, though Lena, standing close, could hear every word. Do you know what I am? Lancer's throat worked as he swallowed. There are stories. The stories, Marius said, don't do us justice. He placed a hand on Lancer's shoulder, the gesture almost friendly to outside observers. Lancer went rigid, his eyes widening. I could take everything from you, Marius continued. Your wealth, your status, your memories, your very will. His fingers tightened fractionally. Or I could simply take your life here and now, and no one would be able to stop me. Lena watched, transfixed, as Lancer began to tremble. Instead, I offer you a choice. Marius's voice dropped lower. Leave the city tonight. Transfer ownership of your company to your wife. Begin a new life elsewhere, with the understanding that if you ever return, or if you ever harm another woman, there will be no second chance. You can't do this, Lancer whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I've existed for centuries by doing precisely what others believed impossible. Marius released him, stepping back. You have until midnight to decide. My associate will be in touch. As if on cue, the hospital doors slid open, and Gideon entered, his imposing figure drawing all eyes. He nodded once to Marius before turning his attention to Lance's men, who were slowly regaining their feet. "Gentlemen," Gideon said, his deep voice carrying, "your car is waiting." The tension in the lobby broke like a fever. Hospital security moved in, escorting Lancer and his men outside. The administrator approached Lena, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Dr. Corbett, are you all right?" "Yes," Lena said, surprised to find it was true. Despite everything, she felt steadier than she had in days. "How is Mrs. Lancer?" "Stable, resting." The administrator glanced at Marius. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks necessary." He inclined his head slightly. "Dr. Corbett, shall we check on your patient?" They rode the elevator in silence. Lena's mind raced, processing what she'd witnessed. The inhuman speed, the way Lance's men had been subdued without apparent effort, the fear in Kevin Lance's eyes when Marius had spoken to him. "He'll leave," she said, as the elevator doors opened on Bethany's floor. "Yes." Marius guided her with a light touch at her elbow. "Few humans can resist when we suggest a course of action." "Mind control?" She kept her voice low as they passed the nurse's station. "More effective on some than others." His gaze slid to her. "It doesn't work on you." She absorbed this, oddly pleased. "Is that unusual?" "Rare," he admitted, "and intriguing." They reached Bethany's room, where a security guard stood at attention. He nodded to them, stepping aside. Inside, Bethany lay sleeping, her bruised face peaceful in repose. Lena checked her vitals, satisfied with her progress. "She'll recover," she told Marius, who stood near the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. "Physically at least. And in other ways, she'll have support." He turned to face her. "My people take care of their own. Is that what she is now? One of yours?" In a manner of speaking. He moved closer. "As are you, if you wish it." The implication hung between them, weighted with possibility. Lena thought of the world she'd glimpsed today, a world of shadows and ancient powers, of dangers she hadn't known existed, and protections she'd never imagined. What would that mean? Exactly, she asked, her voice steady despite the quickening of her pulse. "My protection. My resources." His eyes held hers. "My loyalty. And in return, your discretion. Your trust." He paused. "Your company when you can spare it. Not ownership," she noted. "Not control." He was offering a partnership of sorts, though she suspected few humans had ever been offered such terms. "I need time," she said finally. "This is a lot to process." "Of course," he inclined his head. "I've existed for centuries, Dr. Corbett. I can be patient." They left the hospital together as night fell. Outside, Marius's car waited, a sleek shadow against the curb. Before they reached it, Lena stopped, turning to face him under the glow of a street lamp. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did today. You would have faced him regardless," Marius observed. "With or without me." "Yes," she admitted, "but I'm glad I didn't have to." He smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his face, making him look almost human. "As am I." He opened the car door for her, and as she slid inside, Lena felt a strange sense of rightness settle over her. The world had changed today, or perhaps only her perception of it. Either way, she knew she couldn't go back to the life she'd had before. As the car pulled away from the hospital, Marius beside her, Lena watched the city lights blur into streams of gold and silver against the night. Shadows and illumination, danger and protection, the known and the mysterious, all existing together in a balance she was only beginning to understand. She turned to find Marius watching her, his ancient eyes reflecting the passing lights. "Where to?" he asked. Lena took a breath, stepping into her new reality. "Forward," she said.